Welcome to Permeable Minds with Ethan and Yvonne.
Every episode, we'll be bringing you a new topic to share and discuss. Remember, there are no wrong answers, and all we ask is for you to keep an open mind.
We can't wait for you to take part and join in the conversation.
Something that's really dear to mine and Ethan's hearts is comedy. We feel like our worlds have really collided in the world of comedy. We share some people that we really enjoy listening to, their stand-up shows, etc. There are some people that we've introduced to each other that are completely brand new. And then there's kind of people in the comedy sphere that we both know a little bit about, but we don't listen to them as much. But we're the only person that we can kind of reference each other to. So if some people are in the news, like recently Joe Rogan made headlines on apologizing for something he's done and said on his podcast over the last few years. We know Joe Rogan's podcast, or maybe you guys don't know Joe Rogan's podcast. He's kind of seen as the OG podcast, basically, one of the originals and probably one of the biggest on the planet. He has one of the biggest followings. So our worlds do collide quite often, and we can reference certain comedians and guests on these podcasts quite regular. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's not many people I talk to about certain comedians and certain references, especially because a lot of them I find are American, right?
That's so true. And I didn't realise that I knew so much about American comedians until I started talking to you. And I was like, well, to be fair, it's only come out of the pandemic, personally, my knowledge of American comedians. But even like something that's quite topical actually is you've got the big game this weekend, the Super Bowl.
Oh.
I had zero NFL references. I didn't really care about the game until you started referring things that I'd heard about in certain podcasts. And I was like, whoa, I actually know what Ethan's talking about. I actually know what these comedians are talking about. And although I don't give a crap about NFL, at least I know because I've been listening to these podcasts, right? You're going to need to rein me back in. You know where my mind goes, Ethan. I've already gone off onto a different tangent. But the main purpose of today's episode was to really discuss whether our sense of humour can change with time. And the reason why I wanted to bring it to the table, the reason why it's so relevant for me. So I've just finished watching The Office, the UK Office, for the first time. And I remember saying to you when we last met up, what was it, like 2-3 weeks ago, I don't think I'm ready to watch The Office yet. I feel like my sense of humour isn't quite there. The episodes I've watched are quite boring.
Oh.
And now I've finished it and it was hilarious. And I'm really sad that there's only 2 seasons. Have you ever seen it, first of all, Ethan?
Yeah, no, I have. And I think listeners should send in their hate mail because Yvonne has now, not only has she seen Home Alone for the first time this Christmas, or last Christmas, but now she has finally watched The Office after it's been out for like, God knows how long.
20 years.
Oh my God, like, I was so shocked. I couldn't even believe it. Disgraceful. That's the one word I would say.
But listen, okay?
Yeah.
I've said this a lot about the pandemic. The pandemic has really changed my view, my perception on things. My sense of humour 20 years ago is not, obviously with age and hopefully wisdom, it's changed. But I don't know how you would describe The Office in terms of comedy. For me, it's very dry. It's very cringe, but in a funny way. Like some people say that they don't like watching things like The Peep Show or The Office because it's too cringy and it's too British. I was like, that's exactly why I love it so much, because it's so relatable. What's your take?
Well, relatable is not the word I thought would come out of your mouth there.
Go on.
No, I guess, I mean, I wouldn't say relatable is wrong. I guess I just never thought of it as relatable in terms of the comedy style. But no, I like the cringe. Like, that's why I enjoy it. Like, one of my favourite movies of all time is This Is Spinal Tap, which is, if anyone's watched it, it's basically a mockumentary. And it is like The Office, where people say and do the weirdest things in a way where they feel it's normal, but people, like bystanders, will act like it's just like the weirdest thing, and it is, and it's embarrassing, and it's something, I guess, that is really enjoyable to watch, especially because it is very observational. Yeah, I guess relatable is right, because it is something that could happen to us without us knowing.
Is it British or is it American or something else?
It's actually American.
Oh, okay.
But, I mean, the band is British, the fictional band is British. So, yeah, you have a bunch of Americans doing British accents.
Fine. Just because I feel as Brits, we also have a very niche, a very unique sense of humour. So that's why I also find things like The Office very relatable. Most of us have all been in a office work environment where you've had to interact with these interesting characters. You've had the kooky boss, etc. If you talk about things like The Peep Show, again, the awkwardness of having a flatmate, the awkwardness with sometimes the people you know the most, your best friends, the awkwardness and navigating with relationships, just cringeworthy moments with the parents, meeting it's just everything that encompasses us as Brits. That's why I love it so much. And actually, whenever Ricky Gervais did the Oscars, I didn't think he was that funny. I just thought...
Hold on. He did the Golden Globes.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Whatever award show. I'm so glad you know what you're talking about.
I just didn't want any of the listeners to fact check us, you know? We've got to make sure we're on our game, right? It's the Golden Globes.
Oh my God. Right, what was it? The Golden Globes.
Yeah.
So whenever Ricky Gervais did the Golden Globes, the speech, the presenting, right? I didn't find him that funny. I thought he was quite offensive, which leads into something else I want to discuss today, right? I thought, wow, why is he dicking on all these celebrities, right? When I listen back as a 27-year-old, wait, how old am I? When I listen back as a 28-year-old, I'm like, this guy is hilarious. And I wanted to give a shout out to his podcast with Sam Harris, which we mentioned in the first episode, the philosopher. They do a podcast called Absolutely Mental, which actually reminds me of the dynamic between me and Ethan.
Oh my God.
Of Ricky Gervais being, I don't want to label him as a commoner, but I'm definitely a bit of a commoner, and I very much am. Ethan is a bit more well-spoken, a bit more well-rounded, a bit more knowledgeable about the world, just like Sam Harris, in my eyes.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. But I do think listeners should, make up their own minds on this. Right? They might feel the opposite.
I mean, not that I've got very recent feedback on that or anything, but that's fine. But I really disliked Ricky Gervais until I started listening to the podcast, until I started watching The Office. I'd seen him on other bits and pieces, like Derek. And I just think, honestly, he's a comedic genius. And okay, I'm going to put this out there, a bold statement. My whole perception of comedy has changed after listening to an episode of Absolutely Mental.
Why do you think that is?
So I remember on one of the episodes, he said, you have to be intelligent to be a comedian. I just always found comedy to be like, haha, like slap my knee, have a good time. Not a lot of thought really goes into it. But actually, because it is all an act, one is you're bringing life experiences to the table, but two, you are performing. You have to have some intellect. You have to have some knowledge about the world to even joke about these things.
Yeah.
It blew my mind when he was explaining it in the episode. I'll have to try and find which episode it was and reference it in the podcast description. It changed my whole perception of comedy and what I think about comedians.
Yeah, I think if you look into the educational history of British comedians, especially, you find like half of them, at least, are Oxbridge educated, incredibly intelligent people who've just gone on to comedy. I don't know about American comics in terms of that kind of institutional education, but to be able to make people laugh, you have to be intelligent. I think it's comedy is one of the hardest art forms to master, I swear.
I really did take it for granted. This is why I say my tastes have changed. But when I remember, I have that weird thing of where I remember where I've said stuff.
Yeah.
So I remember the last time I saw you was 2 weeks ago. We were sat in that bar halfway between town and the station in Oxford, right?
Yeah.
And I was having my little Diet Coke because I couldn't handle the bevs because I'd had a heavy one the week before. And I said this to you. I said, my taste in comedy has changed and matured over time. And you were a bit shocked.
It's just, you rarely hear about people like that. I don't know anyone else who's told me that their taste in comedy has changed to such a degree, right? Like, you said it yourself, you used to kind of hate Ricky Gervais. And now, you're like praising him on an altar or something. So...
Mate, do you want to see my shrine?
Oh, God. Quickly hide the dead bodies. But yeah, like, that's never happened. I've never heard of someone, going to such extremes. That's never happened to me. Right now, you can't see it, but Yvonne is like frantically gesturing. So I've clearly said something that's triggered her. But yeah, no, I just want to say that it's never really happened to me.
Can I ask, this is going to lead into a different avenue probably, but it's very relatable.
Mm-hmm.
How would you define your sense of humour?
Oh.
I always love Ethan's reactions. He's always the one with the pressing questions. And then when I come up with a doozy and his just pure reaction when I catch it on the podcast just makes me so happy and so elated.
If you guys want to know what kind of expression that is, just imagine deer in headlights. That kind of like panic where, I have not prepared and did not expect this at all. I think the reason I had that expression is, I guess, how much I want to reveal.
Ooh.
Or how humble I want to be. Because my answer is not that humble. I would describe my taste in comedy as intelligent. That is literally the first word that comes to my mind. I like smart comedy.
Wow, that is not what I would have said. Go on.
It has to be clever in certain ways, whether it be form or how they deliver, or just the way they kind of twist language in unexpected ways to surprise you and elicit a reaction. Yeah, so that's how I would describe it. That's how I would describe what comedy I like.
Can you guess how I would describe your sense of humour?
Oh, no. I have no idea. Wait, how you would describe my sense of humour?
Because I feel like it's shared.
Is probably dry, and probably low.
What do you mean a low sense of humour?
I don't know, like, the bar is set very low.
No. My first instinct is dark.
Okay, then. That is true.
I feel...
Why did I not think of that?
Ethan did like a 180. He couldn't even flipping look at me then. Listen, dark, right? I feel like we both have a very dark sense of humour. Now I have a second question for you as a follow-up.
Uh-oh. I don't like this. Someone stop her.
Do you think that having a dark sense of humour, and what I mean and what I understand and what I would define as dark, is you can laugh at absolute anything. This is where the low might come into it. Like, we are laughing at the things that we definitely should not be laughing about, the things that maybe, or I don't know, can we consider ourselves as ordinary people? Not a lot of people would appreciate, or I'd say not everybody would appreciate if you have a dark sense of humour. So laughing at anything and everyone, even if it's sensitive. And I think sensitivity is a key word here. So my question is, if you have a dark sense of humour, do you think that makes you a bad person?
No. I mean, actually, it depends.
Go.
Why are you laughing at those jokes? Is it because you deep down inside agree with the opinion being expressed on a very sincere level? Or do you just appreciate the craft of the comedian being able to elicit a laugh from you with that kind of subject matter? There's different levels to this thing. Like a psychopath might laugh at dark stuff for different reasons that we laugh at dark stuff. Or maybe it's the same reason. Who knows? But you know what I mean.
I get it. But okay, so I'm going to give an honest response.
Yeah.
I think I've laughed in both of those instances. I've laughed at the craft, and I've laughed because the thing that's dark can be relatable and funny.
Okay. Well, if you press me for a yes or no answer, I would say no. It doesn't make you a bad person. Bad people can laugh at dark humor, but laughing at dark humor does not make you a bad person.
Understood. Okay. That was easier than I thought.
Do you agree? Disagree? Don't tell me you disagree.
No. I completely agree. But there are people in the world that would say laughing at sensitive topics, having a dark sense of humour, means that you're insensitive. So coming back to that word sensitivity, right? Mm-hmm. So quite a few comedians, obviously they're on a platform, they're in the limelight, they're delivering this comedy to hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of followers and listeners and viewers, right? Fans.
Yeah.
So they are always getting the heat if they say a certain joke and it's taken badly, right? Whereas we're probably all making very similar jokes amongst groups of friends, but we never get the heat, right? Because we're not publicizing it.
What are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that we make bad jokes?
I'm not.
This is not true. I want this on the record. We are very politically correct. There we go.
Politically correct. Very. But how can you say that you can't laugh at one thing? So say if you're laughing at something like an illness or a disability, something like that some comedians make these types of jokes, right? Because you're laughing at the craft of the joke. But then when it comes to something like politics, for example, if people get offended about a certain political party, a certain political view, or like geographical area. So for example, I went to a Ramesh Ranganathan gig. Can you call it a gig? Stand-up gig a couple of weeks ago. And he was taking the mick out of people from Liverpool. How can you find it offensive at the Liverpool joke, but then you would laugh at something about a disability or an illness? To give an example.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of the issue, isn't it? If there are jokes that people find offensive for one reason or another, I find it's normally due to their own kind of like personal situation, their own bias. It's not necessarily anything to do with the joke itself. But if you're like us and who don't really care about, like we have thick skin, right? I think which helps a lot. We don't get offended easily. So that means we can laugh at ourselves. And that means we don't hold many topics sacred in terms of like comedy. So everything's fair game. But then you get to the point with these other people who like, you know, because of their own personal situation, all right, that's off topic, but I'll laugh at that. It gets tricky because I don't want to say this, but it makes you look even worse.
How so?
Because you're actively offended by one particular type of joke, then you're actively not offended by another particular type of joke. Both jokes which may be deemed sensitive and offensive, but you pick and choose what you're offended by and what you will defend. Whereas us, it's just like all game, fair game, everything. Where in my eyes, that makes us look better. We're better people.
Not to be humble or anything, Ethan.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's out of the bag now.
The cat is definitely out of the bag. As soon as you said intelligent, I was like, right, hats off. Is there anything that you get offended at? I tried to push the boundary with people that I feel I can push the boundaries with, and I have yet to find your boundary in terms. I thought I found it once when I remember what joke it was as well. I just remember making a crude comment about somebody at work, and you were like, never put that image in my head ever again. And this was like a couple of months into our friendship. So I was like, crap, I found his barrier. I found his weakness. I'm gonna either stay away from that or really hone into it. But then turns out you were making a joke out of the fact that you thought it was offensive, or jokingly offensive, I should say.
Yeah, I guess not really. Like, it all comes down to like the first episode where I say I'm kind of an absurdist. Nothing really holds inherent value to me. I create the value. So there's nothing that's kind of like, a sacred cow where I can't ever cross. I'm mixing up my metaphors a lot, but I think you get what I mean.
I do.
Yeah, I think it helps you reflect as well. Like, even if it hits home quite personally, laughing at these dark jokes helps me reflect on my own personal issues or thoughts that I have, and makes me kind of reevaluate how I see things in my life. So I never see it as like a really bad thing. Possibly there have been times where, in that instance, I was like, whoa, that is not on. But, that's just like a gag reflex or something. Like, I can't help that sometimes, it just happens. But then you think about it, okay, it's kind of opened my eyes. I see things a little different.
I agree. And again, the jokes I used to make about certain things, as soon as it happened a lot closer to home in my life, I saw those jokes slightly differently. But again, it does come down to that thick skin of, all right, I can't pick and choose. Personally, I don't like picking and choosing what I'm offended by. I find it really hard to get offended by things these days. I don't know where it came from in your perspective, but from me, I had to get a sense of humour. Living with 5 boys at university meant that I couldn't be precious. Typically, all of the men in my life all rib on each other. We spoke about this in the first episode as well. There's a difference in relationship, in my eyes, between man and man, woman and man, and woman, right? So I had to really get a thick skin living with boys, because I couldn't be offended at every teeny weeny joke that they said. Otherwise, I would have just gone crazy and probably left, right? So that's where I believe my sense of humour really changed dramatically from university. I came out of school thinking, not to say thinking everything was offensive or I would say I was quite sensitive. I was quite naive about the world. Not to say I am very worldly now, but I have seen, like you said, seen things from a different perspective and appreciate a slightly different sense of humour, and definitely a darker sense of humour. I don't know where yours came from.
Yeah, that's really hard to nail down, to be honest. I can't point to a certain time in my life where I suddenly found myself going to the dark side. But like, yeah, I don't know. I think it was just a gradual evolution, really. No real, milestone in my life that I can point to. In regards to like, can people change their sense of humor, right? If we go back to the original, I guess it shouldn't be a surprise, because as a society, we change our sense of humor.
Yes, very true.
So it's not surprising that on a personal level, we can do the same. So here's an interesting question for you. If we could take Joe Rogan as the example for this, for people who don't know, he's getting called out for, it's not necessarily jokes, but for stuff that he said in the past. And now he's come out and apologized. But you often hear about situations like this, right? A comedian back when he was younger, back in the olden days, even actors and, other people in the spotlight, other celebs, get called out for stuff they said before they end up having to apologize and cancel culture and all that. My question is, right, like, let's say a comedian 20 years ago made some jokes that were funny at the time, right? But now they would be frowned upon. But luckily for them, no one has found out. Like, no one's resurfaced these jokes. These jokes are still hidden in the archives of the internet. But potentially, it's only a matter of time before someone reveals it. Should that comedian come out and apologize now, preemptively, and say, look, I was young back in the day. I said these things. I didn't mean to. Things have changed. I'm a different person now. I apologize. Or should he just not say anything at the moment? Because no one else knows.
I didn't know where that question was going to go, and I did not expect that.
Because I think that's the issue that a lot of these people have now, right? People, they know they've got skeletons in the closet that, back in the day weren't skeletons. They were completely fine, selling out shows, telling these jokes. But now they're like, uh-oh, those things I said in the past, what do I do about them? Because they probably will come out.
So I don't have a direct answer. For anybody who listened to episode 1 will understand this reference. I'm going to give a bit of an Ethan answer. So if you don't know what that means, go back and listen to episode 1.
Good plug.
I try. There's 2 things that really sprung to mind when you were saying that. First of all, if we go back to me watching The Office 20 years later, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are so many jokes in The Office, and even things like The Sopranos, which is even heavier. Like, if anybody who doesn't know what The Sopranos is, it's a American-Italian mafia drama series that was around in the early 2000s. Both of these things, like I said, 20 years ago, has the comedy aged well in terms of, is it still funny? I'd say to you and I, it probably still is funny. The jokes have aged well, or at least the art of the comedy has aged well. But it is deemed as offensive these days to say these certain jokes, right? Which also leads me onto something, I'm just bowing down to my shrine as we talk about this, our beloved Ricky Gervais said in one of his podcast episodes. He said something along the lines of, like you said, society changes with time. Our perception of comedy, our perception of what is funny changes. So as we go on with time, things get less and less funny because they become more offensive, right? It's kind of like funny going along the spectrum to offensive, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to do this in inverted commas, this woke generation who want to be the least offensive possible.
Yeah, okay.
Are trying to be sensitive to everything and everyone, right?
Yep.
So what Ricky Gervais said was, I can't wait to see the next generation be out-woked, basically. Every generation you have is going to have a new wokeness. Something that's politically correct now may not be politically correct in 20 years' time. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I live for comedy, okay? And why I live, and I want to live for the next 60 years or whatever. I cannot wait to see these guys get out-woked, per se, okay? Because every single generation, there's going to be something else that's more and more offensive. And that is my indirect Ethan answer.
But I will say that, I didn't want to be the one to say it, but the picture you presented with basically more and more things becoming offensive, and thus the comedy landscape becoming more and more narrow, it's not something I wanted to say, so I'm glad that you did. But I don't know. I don't want to believe it. I don't want to believe that it will go down that way. I think there'll be a bounce back at one point, because as there are less and less things that are deemed suitable for comedy, I reckon more and more people will push back on that.
And that is something I know from the people in America, the American podcasters that we listen to, the Joe Rogan and co, let's say, they are already speaking about, and they are already observing that it is becoming slightly more difficult because PC political correctness has gone mad. How can they bounce back from it? So I'm looking forward to seeing how the comedy landscape does change in the future. Although I couldn't answer Ethan's question, I wonder if any of you guys out there can.
Yeah, to be honest, I can't even answer that question. I just think it's it's an interesting proposition, right? I don't think many people have thought about that. You see someone come out with an apology, you're thinking, yeah, he should apologize, or she should apologize. But should he have done it before? Like, what can he really do about it? Like,
But then when is the best time to come out, per se? And regardless of when this person comes out with the apology, they're still going to look like a dick, right? Because they're going to look like a dick either way because they're apologizing. So
Yeah.
regardless of whether it's out now or out in 20 years' time, they're still going to look like a dick. Unless we get that bounce back in 20 years' time.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. And to be honest, like, I say it'll come out. You know, there is a little chance that it won't come out. And then you just apologized and revealed yourself when no one else would have known, ever. It's a tricky one. But definitely let us know what you guys think. What should they do? Definitely, we'd love to hear from you. It is a tricky minefield to maneuver through. Definitely hope that I won't have to do something like that in the future.
Wait till all of our skeletons come out of the closet, Ethan. Then we'll be eating our words.
Oh my god, how much time have you got? And I don't think we could end this podcast without talking about a certain something that happened recently. Do you know what I'm talking about?
If it's what I'm thinking of, then yeah. Considering the topic of today and considering the slightly inappropriateness of a certain joke recently, is that the line we're going down? But then obviously it's much bigger than an inappropriate joke, but still.
Yeah, so I guess the thing we're talking about is the infamous slap that made the Oscars relevant again. The slap that Will Smith delivered to Chris Rock over a joke about Will Smith's wife and her hair loss. What are your thoughts on it, first of all?
So, first things first, my initial reaction was wholly in the ball of Chris Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Because abuse in any shape or form is just unacceptable in private, in public. Yes, they're celebrities. Yes, they were having a bit of a, it was obviously banter, or at least it was intended as banter, but he gave him a bit of a thwack. You know what I mean? Like, he went in, regardless of the flipping conspiracy theories, but he went in. But then when you obviously dig a little bit deeper, you understand the anger. You understand the anger that Will Smith had because of it was such a particular jibe about something personal about his wife, like you said. Completely inexcusable, completely. People were saying, oh, he's on drugs, maybe he's drunk. I was like, yeah, but that's when most abuse happens, right? You're not going to inexcuse them because they were drunk or on drugs, whatever it might have been. So I understand his anger because of the way the joke was made and the joke that was made. But one, definitely shouldn't have hit him, obviously. But two, then it goes back to the earlier point that we made of if you laugh at one thing, but then you take another thing really personal and really seriously, it's like, where's the line? I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't listen to Chris Rock's monologue or any of his other jokes. In the clip I saw, the joke before was at Javier Bardem's expense.
And his wife.
Yeah, Penelope Cruz. So, I don't know, like, I agree with a lot of the comedians out there where they say it sets a bad precedence. You know, if people aren't happy with a joke, they can just come up and slap you.
Of course, yeah. That was a new extreme.
That was a bad look.
How many times would Ricky Gervais have got hit at the amount of jokes he made, like we said earlier?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's hosted like so many times. He could have got slapped so many times.
But there's a reason why they keep bringing him back, right? Because he's fucking hilarious.
I mean, he brings the eyeballs. And I guess this incident also brought eyeballs to the Oscars. Thing is, right, for me, the joke, one, wasn't that offensive. Two, wasn't that great. So, in my opinion, Will Smith had no reason to do what he did. Absolutely none.
So you thought the the joke wasn't even that bad and that funny.
And if we take it, like, if we look more in depth at the joke, he compares it to G.I. Jane, right? I think people have said this online, but Demi Moore was well hot in G.I. Jane. So I don't know, like, what it is. There might be some cultural stuff in there, like some cultural leftovers that I don't know about, in terms of maybe African Americans and hair. Maybe there's something there, I don't know. But if I just take it at face value, nah, inexcusable, no reason at all.
So you mentioned a little bit about severity. So because the joke wasn't that bad and not that funny, what if the joke was that bad? Would it still have been inexcusable in your eyes?
Yeah. I guess my point is that it doesn't really matter how bad the joke is. I don't think people should be able to do that, as long as it's still a joke. Now, if it skews from being a joke into being a flat out insult, that's a different thing. But if it's a joke, I don't think you should be taking that too personally.
Plus, it kind of goes into what we were saying last episode with this heat comes with the territory a little bit, right? Like what we were saying about Kanye West.
Yeah.
And him getting certain heat, getting a lot of attention. If you're in the limelight, you're going to have jokes made about you one way or the other, right? Because we're not saying, or I'm not saying, they should be made fun of. They should be because they're in the limelight, it means that we can roast them more. But because their life is public, it means there are more things to say. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we know more about them. So naturally, there will be more jokes about them. And also, Will Smith has been on the receiving end quite a bit in the last couple of years, I would say. A lot of it which is just his own fault, or, Jada's fault. So what do they really expect when they're putting it out there like that? Comedians can take the most mundane things, make an interesting observation, and make a joke out of it. If the Smiths want to give them such great ammunition on a public platform, then, you got to expect that, surely.
Yeah, because I've been watching interviews between them. They've openly had an interview about the ups and downs of their relationship and things like that. It's something that they agreed to do. I don't know if you've ever seen that video, Ethan.
Well, I haven't seen that. Are you talking about that Red Table talk thing that they had?
I wouldn't know what the official name is, but I know they were discussing the ins and outs, and Jada basically admits that she had, and I quote, entanglement with the guy August. Is that his name? Yeah. Apparently Jaden's mate, which is pretty funny. Interesting.
Yeah, entanglement became such a big meme, I guess, for a while. Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. And it was so public. They put it out there. What did they really expect was going to come out of that?
And the second question we have to ask, which does relate to the last episode, in terms of, can you separate the art from the artist? Let's just rewind and go back to that, because I feel that's also very prevalent in terms of quite a lot of the people around me, quite a lot of friends and family members are saying, I cannot see Will Smith in the same light ever again. People have said he's always been a little bit too big for his boots. He's always been a bit arrogant. An inside source said, when I mean an inside source, I mean a friend, said, me and my intel, said that he turned down films like The Matrix. He was the first choice for The Matrix, which I didn't know about. And he turned it down because he, was too big for his boots. He was also first choice for Django.
Oh, yeah, I think I heard that as well, yeah.
And because he wasn't going to be a main part in that film, in Django Unchained, apparently he turned it down. So I didn't really know any of this. And I always loved Will Smith from Bel-Air, right? From The Fresh Prince. Mm-hmm. But yes, last episode we were saying, can I separate the art from the artist? But will I go out of my way to watch a Will Smith film? I mean, to be honest, he hasn't really released that many good things over the last few years. The last good thing I can remember is Hitch, to be honest. That was great.
Oh my God.
Throwback to 2005, 2006 on Valentine's Day I was watching that.
Well, that's an old film. But I mean, I don't know. So are you saying that what are you saying?
To be honest, I wouldn't go out of my way to watch his stuff anyway, but I feel like I'm going to be a little bit more conscious about it. If he's the lead, would I go and spend my money? You know what I mean? Like, I've already changed my mind from last episode. Like, I thought I could clearly separate art from artist, but I don't know if I can. And this is me being choosy and me being... I'm choosing my cases. I'm choosing my battles rather than just a blanket, yes, I can. I don't think my opinion on Chris Rock has changed because the art of comedy, like we said, this whole episode is all about being intelligent. Yes, again, he needs to choose his fights, choose his battles, choose his jokes carefully. I don't think he'll be making a joke about Will Smith and Jada anytime soon, at least if they're not in the room.
He's got a tour coming out, I think, right? Sold out completely because he's going to have jokes about Will Smith and Jada. So, yeah, I think it's the opposite. He's going to be using all that. A lot of people were saying he looked like he had jokes to say after he got slapped, but he thought better of it at that point in time. So, I think we're in for a ride in terms of Chris Rock.
Would you pay to see that?
Not how much they're going for now. But yeah, I mean, for me, Will Smith, yeah, Fresh Prince was cool. He had some other good films that I enjoyed. I actually enjoyed I Am Legend, Men in Black, the first one, Independence Day, of course, Welcome to Earth and all that nonsense. He's never really been at the top of my list, I would say. I've never hated him. I thought he was quite likable. But I think what I realised after he slapped him was that he's also a Scientologist, which I forgot. And yeah, I guess it's not really going to affect me because I wasn't too invested in Will Smith. I'm glad he didn't take the role of Neo or Django. Not from my boy Jamie. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to affect me, but I don't think it will. It's just another thing that's happened with Will Smith.
In the Will Smith, what did you call Kanye West? His circus. I love that. In the Will Smith circus.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean...
But what I was saying about Kanye and mental health, is there something a bit deeper? Was it just a random fit of rage? Or is there something a little bit deeper that maybe we shouldn't give him so much heat? Yes, it was wrong, but again, have we got to dig a little bit deeper? He's been through shit with his wife over the last few years. Is there a reason why it came to a peak on that night? And unfortunately, Chris Rock was the one to catch the end of it.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say catch his hands. Oh, well, that was a missed opportunity.
Soz.
Yeah, I mean, no sympathy from me. Look, I think I said this last time. Mental health is a real issue, but that shouldn't excuse you from stuff you've done, especially in Will Smith's case where we don't know. We don't know. I don't feel comfortable in this case giving him the benefit of the doubt. And that's pretty strong, I think.
Okay, I accept that. There's no 3-part documentary about Will Smith and his life.
I mean, probably will be, right? His family is so crazy that They deserve a doc. We deserve to know the truth, I guess.
I would watch that, but then I'd be going against what I said and paying royalties. So we'll see what happens when that documentary comes out. So guys, it'll be so great to hear from you, your answers, your responses, your thoughts, your opinions. Hopefully this has been a thought-provoking episode. For those of you who aren't even into comedy that much, it has still hopefully opened your eyes and opened a discussion. And as you can tell, me and Ethan are coming up with new, live reactions to stuff that we didn't even think we'd come up with. And we've done it on the spot. There's only a certain amount of preparation you can do, but a lot of it is what you hear on the podcast. So thank you so much for listening. If you did want to get in touch, you can get hold of us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Permeable Minds, or via email at permeablemindspodcast@gmail.com. And we will see you on the next one, guys.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.